It is one of the most notorious assassinations in modern history. The murder of the Romanovs, Russia's ruling family. Once the subject of a high-stakes murder investigation, the trail went cold over 50 years of Soviet rule. Now, the mysterious deaths are fueling a heated battle between forensic scientists, religious leaders, and Russia's political elite. Are the bones buried in St. Petersburg really those of the Romanovs? And what became of two of their children whose bodies were missing from the original grave? Disagreements between scientists and the Russian Orthodox Church keep the mystery alive. Could members of the family have survived a night of unspeakable brutality? Or did one of the world's most powerful dynasties really come to an end in the Siberian woods, changing the course of world history to this day? On the night of July 16, 1918, the last living Tsar of Russia and his family sleep soundly, unaware that the bloody civil war sweeping the country will soon overtake them. For 78 days, the family has lived in a drab compound in the remote city of Ekaterinburg, near the Siberian border, as prisoners of communist revolutionaries fighting to control Russia. Just past midnight, with troops loyal to the Tsar fast approaching the city, the guards wake the royal family, telling them that they are being moved to a safe location. But the guards have no intention of protecting the family, and this night will soon become the brutal closing chapter of 3 centuries of Romanov rule. At the height of his reign, Tsar Nicholas had been the richest, most powerful man in the world, controlling 1/10 of the Earth's surface and a fortune worth $30 billion.
Until the revolution, the Tsar was considered the anointed of God. He controlled the government. He was the supreme head of the Orthodox Church. He was worshipped as a demigod by most of his subjects, and his word was considered law in every aspect of life.
Every decision was his. Even the most simple name change had to go across his desk.
With his marriage to Alexandra, a German princess and granddaughter of Queen Victoria, the Tsar expanded his sphere of influence to include the courts of Europe. In St. Petersburg, the Tsar and his family lived in a breathtaking palace with 1,000 rooms. Hundreds of servants attended their every whim, and it seemed like a fairy tale existence.
I think the picture that most people had of the Romanovs was of a very privileged family, but a family with which they could identify.
Nicholas was extremely clever in the way he used his family. He had 4 gorgeous daughters. He had a beautiful son. They were very photogenic. I think he used them to sort of boost the very early on celebrity of the ruling family.
But the Romanovs harbored dark secrets behind these carefully orchestrated images. Once omnipotent, their far-reaching powers were slipping from their grasp. Inside the palace, the long-awaited heir to the throne was diagnosed with hemophilia. The slightest of injuries could bring on premature death for Alexei and a crisis of succession for the royal family. Guards protected the young Tsarevich day and night and kept his condition secret from the Russian people. Alexandra was desperate to help her son, so she turned to a mystic healer named Grigory Rasputin. Despite his questionable reputation, Rasputin quickly became one of the Tsarina's closest advisors, fueling the Russian people's growing mistrust of the German-born Tsarina. The Tsar himself earned the nickname Bloody Nicholas. In 1905, his soldiers gunned down hundreds of striking factory workers gathered outside the Romanovs' winter palace. The massacre sparked outrage and led to many more violent clashes with imperial forces. As World War I erupted along Russia's Western Front, the death toll mounted. Month after month, hundreds of thousands of soldiers were slaughtered on the battlefield. Supplies of food and other vital goods dwindled, and starvation was rampant. By the end of the war, the list of Russian casualties, civilian and military, numbered almost 4 million dead.
Economic conditions for most of the Tsar's subjects were abysmal. Starvation was common, famine was common, and there was a sense of hopelessness that pervaded these people's lives.
In 1917, long-simmering discontent with the Tsarist government boils over into open rebellion. Revolution sweeps the country. In a series of bloody battles, communist rebels defeated forces still loyal to the Tsar. Nicholas is forced to abdicate the throne, and the rebels drive him into exile, far from the seat of power, to Ekaterinburg, a provincial town near the Siberian border. The Romanovs, accustomed to a life of unparalleled opulence, are now imprisoned in a compound known as Ipatiev House. And this is where a veil of mystery falls over the fate of the Romanovs. The only eyewitnesses to their final day are their guards, men hand-picked as their executioners. That day, forces loyal to the Tsar are advancing on Ekaterinburg in a desperate attempt to rescue the royal family. The local revolutionary authorities, afraid that the Tsar might be freed, order the guards at Ipatiev House to carry out a secret plan. What is known about the night of July 16, 1918, is based primarily on the first-hand testimony of the executioners, conflicting accounts clouded by emotion. With the sound of cannon fire signaling the approach of the Tsar's army, the commandant of the guards, Yakov Yurovsky, orders the Tsar and his family down into the cellar of Ipatiev House. He tells the family that this is for their own safety. Nicholas is joined there by his 13-year-old son, Alexei, his wife, Alexandra, and their 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, along with the family doctor and 3 servants. Yurovsky arranges his prisoners in a row, explaining that it is necessary to take a group photograph. The family soon realizes that this is a lie.
Then the door opened and in came the death squad. So that was a moment of confusion. Who are these people? Why are all these guys coming in?
Yurovsky reads aloud a brief and utterly shocking statement.
He said, your relatives have tried to save you. They're still trying to save you. And we can't have that, so we have to kill you. And I don't think Nicholas took that in. He wasn't expecting it. He said, what? You know, what did you say? And Yurovsky pulled out his gun and shot Nicholas point blank.
In the first wave of the attack, the room fills with smoke. The guards stagger out to catch their breath, many of them sickened by the carnage.
После первых выстрелов
The execution of the Tsar's family presented a horrifying and ugly sight. After the first shots, people started running around the room. Some were executed right away, some not.
Yurovsky called them back in to finish the job. And they just opened fire again, started shooting, and 2 of the girls were shot in the head as they clutched each other. Alexei was sitting in his chair, not knowing what was going on, and someone came over and shot him.
The executioners hope the story of the Romanovs will end here. Instead, it is just the beginning. Within hours, stories of the murders are circulating in the streets of Ekaterinburg. There are rumors that 1 or more of the family may have survived the murders, escaping with the help of guards. The Central Soviet, led by Vladimir Lenin, proudly claims responsibility for the Tsar's execution, knowing that the monarchist forces will quickly collapse in the wake of this announcement. But the Soviets deny killing the German-born Tsarina and her children, fearful that their deaths might inflame relations with Germany.
They recognized that the murder of innocent children and women wouldn't set well with the West and would only, damaged their reputation. And so it was easier for them to simply cover it up, feign ignorance, say they didn't know what happened to the family.
The Soviets stand by their original story for 6 years, claiming responsibility for the Tsar's death, while insisting that the rest of his family is being kept alive in a secret location. But the case becomes an international scandal, outraging monarchists and surviving Romanov family members now living in Europe and the United States. The Romanov family and their supporters defied the Soviet authorities and commissioned an independent inquiry. They choose Nicholas Sokolov, a judicial investigator living in exile in Paris, to lead the project. In 1924, Sokolov's findings blow the case wide open. Nicholas Sokolov's investigation into the death of the Romanov family delivered shocking results. He documents the case fastidiously, interrogating eyewitnesses, including the executioners themselves. He combs the scene of the murders and the alleged burial site. His report exposes gruesome new facts about the ultimate fate of the Tsar and his family. Contrary to Soviet accounts, Sokolov claims that the entire family, including the 4 daughters and the young Tsarevich, had indeed been executed at Ipatiev House, along with the Tsar. And there was more. According to Sokolov, the soldiers stabbed and bludgeoned several of their victims to death, including the daughters of the Tsar, who were protected from the hailstorm of bullets by corsets lined with the family's jewels. Sokolov also learns that Yurovsky had originally planned to hide the bodies from both the monarchist supporters and vandals by dumping them in an abandoned mine shaft deep in the woods outside Yekaterinburg. But this is where Sokolov's investigation offers few answers and raises many more questions. Sokolov scours the site where Yurovsky claims the bodies were dumped, but turns up only scant evidence, which he carries away with him in a single small box. Captain Peter Sarandanaki grew up hearing tales of Sokolov's investigation from his grandmother, who traveled with Sokolov and actually saw the contents of his infamous box.
As a 10-year-old boy, she was telling me the story, and she found the Empress's finger, Dr. Botkin's dentures, bones, and other different items that Sokolov had.
There was also some greasy matter mixed with earth, which Sokolov contended had been congealed fat that had run off the bodies after they were burned.
Sokolov concludes that Yurovsky and his men hacked the bodies to pieces, then burned them with fire and acid until there was nothing left.
And the thing that was shocking about Sokolov's publication was not only that the Empress and her children had died, but that their bodies had been cut up, dissolved, burned, that they had suffered this indignity after death, and that left Europe reeling.
Sokolov returns to Europe with his report and his box of evidence, but receives a chilly reception from members of the Romanov family, including the Tsar's mother.
She refused to receive him. She absolutely, until the day she died, believed that her son had survived.
Sokolov carries his box of evidence with him until his death, but his findings only fuel more speculation about the fate of the royal family. Could their executioners have actually destroyed a half-ton of flesh in the course of a few hours, as Sokolov concluded? Or could members of the family still be alive and someday reclaim the Tsar's fortune and his throne? In 1924, the chief investigator in the Romanov murders searches the woods outside Yekaterinburg for clues. He determines that Soviet executioners had destroyed the bodies, leaving behind only small bits of bone and flesh. not nearly enough evidence to reconstruct the crime. But could the guards have obliterated 11 bodies, more than a half-ton of bone and flesh in the space of a few hours, barely leaving a trace of their barbaric operation? Many Russians believe not, leading to rampant speculation about the fate of the Romanovs. But of all the possible stories of survival, none capture the public's imagination like those of the legendary princess Anastasia. The Tsar's beautiful youngest daughter was fun-loving and mischievous, a strong-willed tomboy who many believed capable of surviving that dark night at Apatyev House. Why was Anastasia's story the subject of such intense fascination? The answer lies, in part, with the appearance of a mysterious young woman who claims to be the Russian princess. Could she be the real Anastasia? Anna Anderson first appears in the public eye in 1920, a young woman who had attempted suicide by throwing herself off a bridge in Berlin, ending up in a German mental hospital. At first, the young woman's identity is unknown, but with prompting from her nurses, she eventually identifies herself as the Princess Anastasia. She tells stories of life inside the Russian court, including intimate details that bolster her claims. The young woman quickly attracts the notice of the surviving members of the Romanov family, who are now living in exile throughout Western Europe and the United States.
There was such intense curiosity about her and conflict about her because she made enemies very fast by being indiscreet. She talked a lot about family matters to people who were not in the family, and she exposed a lot of hidden things. And people who sort of were opposed to her, they were naturally very suspicious about her.
Some family members believe that the woman, who calls herself Anna Anderson, is simply an imposter. There is good reason to question her motives. A vast fortune is at stake. During their reign, the Romanovs were among the wealthiest families in the world. Their assets dwarfed those of the other European royal families.
The New York Times in the 20s suggested that he was worth $30 billion in 1914 terms. That's an enormous amount. Mind you, it included the gold mines he owned, it included the gold reserves, it included the royal jewels, one royal yacht, 2 royal trains, and palaces in not only St. Petersburg, but also in the Crimea, which is rather handy for a nice warm holiday in the summertime.
All of the Tsar's property and possession inside Russia, including the palaces and estates and the treasures inside, were seized by the Bolsheviks following the Russian Revolution. But it is rumored that Nicholas, anticipating the revolution and his own exile, had moved a sizable portion of his assets abroad.
Tens of millions of pounds, dollars, and French francs in London, Paris, New York. I would put the figure at that time at about at least 100 million.
There is a bitter split among the surviving Romanovs. Many are fanatical in their belief that Anna Anderson is indeed the Princess Anastasia. They welcome her into their homes, both in Europe and the United States. But in 1933, a contingent of German-born relatives asks a Berlin judge to formally declare the Tsar and his immediate family dead. Doing so may clear the way for them to inherit whatever remains of the royal family's estate. Backed by family members loyal to her cause, Anna Anderson initiates a counterclaim.
It wasn't a claim saying, I am Anastasia. It was, I am not dead.
Opponents to Anna's claim present new evidence unearthed by a private detective working for the Romanov family. It suggests she is actually Francesca Szankowska, a Polish factory worker who disappeared around the same time Anna Anderson first appeared in Berlin. Anna Anderson is never able to prove her case in a court of law. She dies in 1984, with the world still wondering, could she be the Princess Anastasia? It would be more than a decade before new evidence emerges that would appear to establish, once and for all, her true identity. In the Cold War Russia of the 1950s and 60s, dissent is forbidden, conformity mandatory. Cultivating the image of a unified superpower has become all-important to the communist regime. Under the heel of the KGB, the Russian people walk in tandem, and anyone who dares to question the official version of the Romanov murders is playing with fire. By the 1970s, the government has long since closed the books on the assassinations, and in 1977 orders the Apatyev House, the sacred site of the Romanov murders, to be demolished. But even after the walls of Apatyev House come crashing down, rumors persist about the killings. Geologist Alexander Avdonian and filmmaker Gyeli Ryabov are amateur historians who feel that too many questions are left unanswered. And too many answers ought to be questioned. In 1978, the two men locate the eldest son of Yakov Yurovsky, the man who was in charge of the Romanov executions 60 years prior. They are stunned when the younger Yurovsky hands them his father's top-secret report on the murders. In the report, Yurovsky claimed that the bodies were not completely destroyed, as previously believed. They were moved. If this is true, where are their bodies now? According to the reports discovered by Alexander Avdonian and Gyeli Ryabov, Yakov Yurovsky had relocated the bodies of the Royal Romanov family on July 19, 1918. He did this after discovering that some of his soldiers had betrayed the secret location of the Romanovs' grave. Yurovsky collected the bodies and set off for another nearby mine. But along the way, his truck broke down.
And at 4 a.m. on the morning of July 19th, the truck wouldn't go any further. So all Yurovsky could do was bury the bodies where the truck had stalled, burning 2 of the bodies on the same spot and burying the other 9 in a common grave.
Yurovsky and his men poured sulfuric acid on the bodies and covered the shallow tomb with sticks and wooden planks. Before he left, Yurovsky also recorded the precise location of the Romanovs' grave. In the spring of 1979, the two men embark on a secret and risky expedition to find the Romanovs' hidden grave. If they are successful, the entire world will learn the appalling details of the most shameful page in Russian history and of the lies that the Soviets perpetuated to hide the terrible truth. Despite the dangers, Avdonian and Ryabov press forward, and in just a few weeks, they find what they are looking for.
We came at 10 o'clock and started work. We cleared the space from grass and discovered the wooden rails. It seems like this was the right place. There was 6 of us, but I was the one who started digging. I sorted blindly and felt something round, and I took it out, and it was a skull. I became seized with horror because the lower jaw have golden teeth.
There were bullet holes in the skulls, and the amazing thing was that the brain was intact in every one of them. We were terrified. I thought to myself, we curse this country and these people. I don't have human words to define this. And of course we were shocked, we were scared. The responsibility for everything we did was real now. Nobody would have protected us but God.
Avdonian and Ryabov know that if news of their discovery is leaked, they will surely be jailed, or worse. But they have come too far to deny themselves the answers they so desperately want. They remove 3 of the skulls from the grave and quietly seek out the help of a forensic expert. But none are willing. A year later, frustrated and ever more fearful that the KGB will catch wind of their enterprise, the men return the skulls to the grave. They agree to keep their discovery secret until their country is prepared, at long last, to accept the truth. Ten years later, when Mikhail Gorbachev ushers in a new era of glasnost and the Soviet government falls, Ryabov decides that the time is right to reveal the secret of the Romanov grave.
Avdonin continued to fear revenge, and so did I. But I understood that if we did not reveal these circumstances to the whole world, the grave might disappear.
The whole world is buzzing with news of their discovery. Shortly after Boris Yeltsin takes office in 1991, he dispatches a team of archaeologists to exhume the skeletal remains that are believed to be the royal family. At a nearby laboratory, hundreds of bones are laid out and examined, only to reveal even more mysteries. 11 people are thought to have died in the brutal murders, but only 9 skeletons were unearthed.
They expected to find everyone there, and after several days' worth of work, when they found that they only had 9 bodies, suddenly the door was open for the possibility of survival. And suddenly, once again, the thought that Anastasia may have survived was worldwide news.
The task of identifying the skeletons falls to Russian forensic anthropologist Sergei Abramov. Abramov uses a unique computer program that can identify skulls by matching them to photographs of faces.
If we superimpose the image of the skull in the same scale and the position as the image of the face, we can get correspondence between the face and the skull if this skull derives from this face.
Abramov painstakingly reconstructs the skulls recovered in Ekaterinburg and compares them to dozens of historical photographs of the Romanovs.
Based on the result of our investigation, we determined that the group of people in that grave was exactly the group that was assumed to be there. Tsar, Tsarina, and 3 daughters, Olga, Anastasia, and Tatiana. Maria and Tsarevich Alexei were not in the grave.
Abramov's findings dashed the dreams of many who hoped that it was Princess Anastasia, not her sister Marie, who is the missing female skeleton. Instead, it seems that Anastasia was one of the shattered bodies found in the grave. But weeks later, an American team begins a second inquiry and questions the precision of Abramov's technique. The American team, unconvinced that the skulls have been reliably reconstructed, takes a different approach to identification. They scrutinize the condition of the skulls, ribs, and teeth.
When examining a skeleton, any skeleton, what a forensic anthropologist will do is look for signs of age. There is a process of ossification, basically cartilage turning into bone as we age. That process can be related to the chronological age of the individual.
The American team makes a startling contradiction to one of the key results of the Russian investigation. According to the Americans, none of the victims recovered in Ekaterinburg could possibly be 17 years old, the age at which Anastasia disappeared. The Americans believe it is Anastasia, not Marie, who remains missing. Despite the evidence presented by the American team that believes Anastasia is the missing Romanov daughter, the Russians hold fast to their position that it is Marie who is lost. The investigation reaches a deadlock, with the two teams in complete opposition over the identity of the missing daughter. Once again, it seems that no one, even the world's most eminent forensic experts, can provide conclusive answers about what happened that terrifying night in 1918. But it wouldn't be long before scientists find new evidence in the battered bones that may finally bring an end to the mystery. Many Russians, accustomed to decades of Soviet misinformation, question the validity of the bones. Some even maintain that they are a KGB ruse, designed to hide the true fate of the Tsar and his family.
The whole fabric of this story is woven into hundreds and hundreds of years of Russian history. What you have is different factions going after each other, lies, allegations, tyranny. People question, people don't accept, and people know that there are other circumstances controlling their fate.
But in 1992, an emerging forensic technology offers renewed hope that the remains can indeed be positively identified. Russian scientists transport fragments from each of the skeletons to England's Forensic Science Service, one of the world's premier criminal science labs at the time. The bones are delivered to Dr. Peter Gill, an expert in the new science of genetic fingerprinting. Dr. Gill must compare the DNA pulled from the skeletons with those of known members of the Romanov family. England's Prince Philip is among several Romanov relatives who agree to contribute genetic samples. If the bones discovered in Ekaterinburg are genuine, their DNA will match. Dr. Gill conducts his analysis using what is known as mitochondrial DNA, which is passed along the maternal bloodline, perfectly intact from one generation to the next.
It's like a little time machine. It is more or less unchanging over the generations. And of course, in the analysis of the Tsar, the Romanov family, this is quite important.
On July 10th, 1993, Dr. Gill announces that Prince Philip's DNA is a near-perfect match to the DNA found in the bones believed to be Tsar Nicholas. The match between DNA from the bones and from living Romanov descendants appears to prove that the bones are the true remains of the Romanovs. In 1994, DNA analysis is used to settle another enduring mystery in the Romanov saga: Anna Anderson's contentious claim that she was the Tsar's youngest daughter, Anastasia. Years after her death, a tissue sample from Anna Anderson's body, saved during an operation, is discovered in a Virginia hospital near where she lived her final years.
If Anna Anderson really was the Duchess Anastasia, then her mitochondrial DNA sequence should be identical to that of Prince Philip.
Gill also obtains a genetic sample from a relative of Francesca Szankowska, the Polish peasant who had disappeared in Germany in early 1920, just when Anna Anderson had first appeared in the public spotlight.
Here the Tsar, the Tsarina, and the 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gill announces his results to throngs of journalists gathered in London to witness the final chapter in the Anna Anderson saga.
Firstly, the samples said to have come from Anna Anderson could not be associated with a maternal relative of the Tsarina or of His Royal Highness Prince Philip.
Gill's findings confirm that Anna Anderson was not Anastasia. What's more, her DNA is a match to the Polish peasant Francesca Szankowska. The news crushes the hopes of many loyalists who had passionately believed that the DNA analysis would confirm Anna Anderson's identity as the heir to the Romanov title. In the years following the first DNA tests, several scientific teams corroborate Dr. Gill's results. But a number of historians, academics, and even other scientists step up to challenge the findings. At the core of the conflict is whether the bones are a reliable source of evidence.
The first exhumation missed over 800 bones, and they had to go back 3 months later and dig for finger bones and joints and knee bones. So as far as contamination, as far as the chain of custody, as far as the integrity of the evidence, the whole scene was mishandled.
The Russian government must decide how to dispose of the bones found outside Ekaterinburg. Dismissing them as nothing more than historical curiosities, or validating them as the sacred remains of Russia's last ruling family. In 1998, 80 years after the Romanov murders, Boris Yeltsin presides over the burial of the last Tsar, Nicholas II, his wife, and 3 of their 5 children in the cathedral in St. Petersburg, where generations of Romanovs lie interred. It is the government's official acknowledgement that the bones unearthed in Ekaterinburg are indeed the royal remains. Public acceptance of the findings of scientists based on DNA analysis. But doubts still haunt the leadership of the Russian Orthodox Church, which had years earlier canonized the Romanov family. If these bones are to be recognized as the mortal remains of saints, the Church requires unassailable proof. So during the burial service, the Church refuses to name the bodies.
In the same scientific circles, there was a polarized opinion, and the specialists of the same skill level, equally serious and more famous, are saying, no, we refute this opinion. So, we cannot bless and acknowledge these remains, since even in the scientific field, such dichotomy exists.
Alexander Avdonian sometimes visits the spot where he made his earth-shattering discovery, now marked with a modest memorial. Yet in the absence of irrefutable evidence, the Russian Orthodox Church refuses to acknowledge that the bones found here in the woods near Ekaterinburg are those of the Romanovs. Instead, the Church sanctifies a nearby site, the place where Sokolov found fragments of charred bone and flesh in the 1920s. This is where the Church contends the story of the Romanovs ended, and it declares this holy ground a place of pilgrimage.
This is considered their official grave because they were here for so long. And so it is much like in America where we bring flowers. On the base of that monument, you will see toys.
Among the first Americans making the pilgrimage to Ekaterinburg is Captain Peter Sarandanaki. Now a retired sea captain living in New Jersey, Sarandanaki has a personal stake in the story. Sarandanaki's great-grandfather was a general in the counter-revolutionary army who had been sent to Ekaterinburg to rescue the Tsar. He and his battalion arrived 7 days too late. 4 generations later, Sarandanaki hopes to redeem the family name and ensure that the Tsar and his family are properly identified and buried.
I believe that until we find the remains of Tsarevich Alexis and those of his sister Anastasia or Maria, then the matter will not be resolved. And this is why I'm still searching to this date.
Sarandanaki is convinced that Sokolov's box, the box that his grandmother told him contained bones, tissue, and even a severed finger salvaged from the alleged burial site, might hold the missing key to the mystery.
We wanted to be able to do a DNA study on an item of blood there to see whether the DNA matched the found Romanovs.
It takes Sarandanaki just 3 phone calls to trace the box to a Russian Orthodox church in Brussels. But his elation quickly turns to despair.
To this date, the church has not allowed us to even view the box or allow scientists to come near it.
Frustrated, Sarandanaki establishes a foundation to begin a renewed search for the 2 missing Romanovs. He organizes multiple expeditions of American scientists to Ekaterinburg, hoping to find evidence of the 2 missing bodies here in the woods where the Romanovs' partial remains had been discovered. Dr. Anthony Falsetti is among the team of U.S. experts who recommend a systematic search of the area.
Overall, what they needed to do was get a better handle of those sites by mapping them and then developing a strategy to employ some of the remote sensing methods, ground penetrating radar, electromagnetics, anything that they could do to look under the ground to begin eliminating sites.
Then, in 2007, a breakthrough sends shockwaves around the world. In a forest near Ekaterinburg, 76 yards from the grave that contained the remains of 5 Romanovs, local researchers find shards of bone and nails. Serendanaki is informed of the news. After testing by both Russian and American laboratories, the results are conclusive. They had discovered human remains. And there's more. On the basis of the expert analysis, it is possible to conclude that parts of skeleton presented for investigation belong to Tsarevich Alexei Nikolaevich and his sister, Princess Maria Nikolaevna Romanova. The 2 missing Romanov children had been found. But even these findings did not convince everyone and only stoked the fires of a decades-long debate. Doubting the authenticity of the DNA testing, the Russian Orthodox Church canceled the funeral that was scheduled for the remains in 2015 after years of further testing.
They all should be buried. Only after that can we say that the civil war is over in Russia, which is very important for the country. I want to stress that more important than the formal legal procedures is the moral sense, which must emerge and become sharp. We must say to each other, yes, we committed a terrible crime, but we repent and we draw a line under it.
Today, the case remains an open investigation. As the 100th anniversary of the Romanov massacre approaches, it remains unclear if the imperial family will ever be reunited at a final resting place. In the years since the fall of the Soviet Union, a cathedral has been built on the site of the Ipatiev House. Commemorating the Tsar and his family, the Cathedral on Blood has become the hub of a growing tourism industry in Ekaterinburg, a sign of the renewed vitality and power of the Russian Orthodox Church in the post-Soviet era. The crowds here are also evidence of a growing nostalgia for the Tsarist era, a time when Russia was one of the world's greatest powers, and the Tsar, one of the world's most powerful and illustrious leaders. Even today, almost a century after the Romanovs' alleged murders, many Russians do not believe that the Tsar and his family are buried in St. Petersburg. For them, the Romanov murders remain an open case. The night of July 16th, the object of intense fascination, inspiring fantasies of what might have been. If the Tsar's army had arrived here in Ekaterinburg just a few days earlier and saved the family from their brutal fate. If the murders had never happened, or if members of the family survived and the Romanovs had regained control of the government, bringing a quick end to the reign of communism. On the night of July 16, 1918, 11 lives hung in the balance here in this dimly lit cellar. And with them, the fate of a nation.